Hello. Okay, we're starting. Hello, everybody. I'm Ivona for Homeopathy for Humanity. I'm here with Tikva Sason.
Hi.
Who is saying hi, and Dr. Sanjay Solunke.
Hello.
And today we are doing a very exciting remedy for our Sunday Materia Medica Pura session, which is called Arnica Montana. So let us begin.
Thank you, Ivona.
You're most welcome, Tikva.
Okay, do we have a picture lined up to look at the Arnica plant?
Ah, what a beauty.
Yep,
Can
that
you
is
see
an
it?
Arnica plant. Yes, we can. And you have the other picture, the other botanical print
Yes.
with
Yes,
the little
fabulous.
bits and pieces. This is
Fun
an Arnica
fact.
plant.
And now you can see flowers, stem, roots, everything. There is
I just wanted to say a fun fact, if I'm allowed.
yeah.
Arnica is actually, I've learned this recently, Arnica is one of the plants that you cannot cultivate by will. So it is like self-growing. And from my knowledge, I think it only grows in very high areas. Anybody else heard of this?
Yeah, it is a wildflower and it does grow in hillsides and mountains. I think that it might grow here, but I'd have to check the listings, the botanical listings. It surely grows where you live.
I've never seen it. I've seen it's like cousins, plants that do look like it, but like up close you can see they're not it. And they do grow like in the higher mountains. But yeah, apparently it's quite expensive as well, Arnica.
There's
like the tincture.
There's a very interesting fun fact about Arnica is that one of the ways that people learned to use it was from sheep. Sheep, when they would fall down, they would eat this plant, and people noticed that. This is how a lot of medicines came into quote unquote medicine of the people, which is a word that is basically used to discredit folk medicine by the medical establishment.
Yeah, ironically.
Yes, but Hahnemann's going
like
to
there's something wrong with that.
Right. Yeah,
of
it's
the
like
people ear.
it's like how I say that anybody who had access in the olden days to an herb woman was less likely to die. But if she were to call the doctor would probably kill the person because of the strong treatments, as opposed to let's use this tincture and let's use this herb and let's make this poultice, as opposed to let's douse you with mercury, relieve you of half your blood, and then cut you up into pieces, right? much safer to call the herb lady when sick in the olden days. Even today, it's much safer to call the herb lady.
Yeah, definitely. And actually the herb ladies had much better understanding even then of anatomy and all of that kind of stuff, Materia Medicas. They actually used a lot of plants that we use as remedies today.
Yes. Yep, because then they were proven for their actual effects instead of their somewhat known effects, which is very helpful.
Exactly.
So yeah, a lot of medicines come from herbology, and then they were potentized and proved according to the requirements. And then we started using them as homeopaths in potency with sometimes surprising results, because the proving data comes up different than what happens when people just take the tincture.
Yeah, which is quite interesting, actually.
I think so.
But that's a topic for another time, maybe.
Yes, but we're going to touch on that ever so slightly here. Okay, so we have here our Materia Medica Pura. And Sanjay has it there on a PDF. And he is
Yes.
going to scroll it so that we can read along at the same time.
Okay.
Okay, the root of this plant. Okay, so we're using the root here.
Mm-hmm.
His favorite habitat is in shrub-grown upland plains. Very soon loses in the air a considerable portion of its odor and its medicinal power, but it loses most by boiling. Okay, so it loses its potency, its medicinal effect quickly, and mostly by boiling. Still, the freshly prepared powder, dried rapidly and thoroughly in the water bath, may be kept with almost unimpaired power for several years in well-corked vials. All the artificial dogmas enunciated by the ordinary medical school, which is in its way a half-learned science, all its scholastic definitions, distinctions, and hair-splitting explanations were in all past centuries unable to discover the specific curative power of this plant or to find out the real remedy of the often dangerous general derangement of the health, which is caused by a severe fall, by blows, knocks, contusions, sprains, or by overstretching or laceration of the solid parts of our body. So this, we do know here just from the introduction that it is very important remedy for all different types of sprains, injuries, stretchings, cuttings, all kinds of things that happen to the internal and external part of the body. And then Hahnemann says down here that it is beneficial for the most severe wounds by bullets and blunt weapons.
What?
And yep, he uses it for bullet wounds. And other ailments consequent on extracting the teeth and other surgical operations whereby sensitive parts have been violently stretched, and also after dislocation of the joints, after setting fractures of the bones, etc. So all kinds of contusions, sprains, in the footnote. And sprains,
Okay.
contusions, and it says the stretching. This is one of the reasons why we commonly give it after childbirth, because everything has to stretch to accommodate a baby to exit.
Oh, but
And
bullet
so-
wounds?
Yeah, Hahnemann's saying bullet wounds as well.
They had bullets then. Okay.
Yes, they did. Bullets were invented in the 1500s.
Jesus. Okay, so much for my history. We'll end this up.
Yeah, so was the
Go ahead.
microscope. The microscope was also invented in the 1500s by a Van Leeuwenhoek, which I'm probably saying wrong.
It's Dutch. I don't think so. I think it's solid. It was
Okay,
Dutch.
so-
So.
Yeah, that's I was just sometimes the pronunciation of various places isn't quite right. So yeah, Van Leeuwenhoek, he did things like look at his sperm and other things.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Creep.
So that's well, he was curious, right? How does this create a
alright.
baby? You know, if it wasn't for
Right.
curiosity, there wouldn't be any science, right, guys?
For sure. Long live science. Good science.
Good science, right?
Good.
Yeah, we could share
Just
that
hung me up.
article. Right. I've got an article in my files about the numbers needed to treat in order to make something, so that whether or not they can be added to the pharmacopoeia in allopathy. And it's like so lame. So few people are needed to benefit in order for them to start giving it to everybody. And therefore,
Yeah.
homeopathy is so good because it is individualized medicine.
The best.
Okay, should I continue?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, common people had to do this for them. And after the fruitless employment of innumerable things, they found at last by accident the true remedy in this vegetable. And hence they called it fall kraut, fall plant. Some 200 years ago, a physician named Fer first mentioned this discovery of domestic practice. Here we're going back to folk medicine, the herb lady, domestic practice, that people knew to use this when there were injuries. Okay, so a guy named Fer, he picked it up and he made note of it. And then if we notice in the group today, I put up a PDF of Panacea Lapsorium. Panacea means cure-all. And there is a booklet with a number of different essays in it called Panacea Lapsorium. Sanjay, did you save that to show the picture of?
What do you want?
I shared Panacea Lapsorium today.
Pictures?
Yeah, I shared the book of Panacea Lapsorium.
It's
I
on
sent
WhatsApp now.
I sent it to you.
On the WhatsApp group?
No, I think I might have sent it to him privately.
Oh, personally.
Yeah,
Oh.
so that he'd know to put it here.
No, I don't want to open that in over here. No.
No, I thought it was absolutely fascinating. Either way, there is a book that was put out with numerous essays about Arnica called Panacea Lapsorium. And Panacea, remember, means cure-all, which was likewise borrowed all the other still extant specific remedies she possesses without exception from the accidental discoveries of domestic practice, which weren't altogether that accidental, but then again, maybe that's a topic for another day, but are unable to find for herself. Now she means allopathy. Allopathy is unable to find these things, these discoveries.
How the people used Arnica in domestic practice without the scientific community informed to them?
Very, very good question. People, from what I hear, people noticed animals would eat it when they were injured. And so people tried it. And it worked for people too. It's very common to make, let's say, a tea out of something like this and give it to people.
Wow.
Mm.
So yeah, a lot of discoveries in quote unquote folk medicine, also known as medicine of the people, came from observing wildlife, animals, and of course there's a huge tradition, lasting for, thousands of years. It's just that allopathy hadn't picked it up until this time period, where Hahnemann says it was 200 years ago. Okay.
Talking about this, 1 minute, 1 minute. On that book. This one?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, you can just scroll that a little bit. It's all in Latin, but it's interesting for its historical.
Wow.
Isn't that fun, guys?
Yeah, amazing. No, but I didn't understand, Tikva. What did you say it was about? Like universal remedies or?
Well, yeah, they're calling it a panacea, and I don't know why, because I can't read that much Latin. But I thought it was interesting in the historical context.
Yeah, I think Panacea was like a Greek goddess.
Exactly.
Like there were plenty of gods of medicine.
Right.
Greek mythology, and Panacea was one of them.
Yes.
But I forgot what it means.
Yeah, but the common knowledge, in common words, of panacea is known as a cure-all.
Yeah, definitely.
That's true. But yeah, I mean, it does go back to, mythology and stuff like that.
Yeah.
it's kind of like how, like what, you've got Clothis, Lachesis, and who's the other one in that trio? The weaver. You've got the weaver who makes the cloth, and then the wearer.
Moiras.
Huh? And then
Are you-
you've got the scissors. We're
Oh,
going back to
like the god, like the goddesses.
yeah, you've got those three, that triad where you've got those three goddesses that are like akin to like the muses, where you have the one who makes the cloth, the one who cuts the cloth at the end of the person's lifespan. And I can't remember which one is Lachesis. Which one is Lachesis there? I don't remember. It's been
I've never heard.
No, you've never heard of it?
No,
it's
I
so
know what you're
interesting.
talking. They're called the Moiras,
Yeah.
but I didn't know they had individual names.
Yes, they have individual names, and one of them is named Lachesis. And we'll have to get into the history of that a little bit when well, we're not going to be doing Lachesis because that
Because it's a herring remedy.
Yes.
Well, maybe one day.
Maybe one day, because that's got great stories.
Okay.
Okay, so
Continue.
all right, thank you for pulling that up for our historical enjoyment.
No
Okay,
problem.
so Hahnemann goes back to say that allopathic medicine never attempted to ascertain the pure effects of natural substances on the healthy human body. The symptoms of all injuries caused by a severe contusion and lacerations of the fibers are tolerably uniform in character. And as the following record shows, these symptoms are contained in striking homeopathic similarity in the alterations of the health which Arnica develops in the healthy human subject. So he says that the herbal use of it shows very clearly as well, is very similar in ways when it comes to use for injuries, bruises, contusions, and cuts of the fibers. Fibers means everything from skin to muscle to tendons to all the different soft parts of the body. Yeah, so contusion, cutting off parts. There, and he's saying it's, it's a near specific, that it handles that well in most situations. Okay. The severe and extensive contusion injuries, the cure is very much promoted when
Dr. Suma, could you please turn off your microphone?
Yep, she got it. Okay, so
Thank you.
the severe and extensive contusion injuries, the cure is very much promoted when, in addition to a small dose of arnica, now this is very, very interesting because this goes against a lot of different things that we've seen already. Arnica taken internally, when necessary, a dose every 3 days. The parts are also, for the first 24 hours, externally moistened with wine or equal parts of brandy and water, with 1 pound of either of which 5 to 10 drops of the 100-fold potentized dilution of arnica are mixed and strongly succussed about 10 times. So this is really interesting because this is usually way out there for Hahnemann to use any kind of external application. It's only mentioned like one other time, and that's Methuselah. So he says to take this dilution is the 100-fold, which equates to kind of like around a 30C, as Ivona has shown us in her nice math video that we have posted on YouTube.
Watch it, everybody. It's great.
Yep, watch the YouTube video, sign up and like this channel, and join us for new content arriving regularly. Okay, so he says, take a little bit, 5 to 10 drops of this potentized dilution of arnica, discuss it 10 times. Do that either with wine or brandy mixed with wine and apply it as a poultice. Can we believe it?
I thought he mentioned in the organon we can apply the remedy externally.
Right. In the organon, it's all full of never apply the remedy externally. Never apply the remedy externally. But here he's saying you can apply the remedy externally. In what period? In the first 24 hours after the injury.
Oh,
So I wonder, this makes
but not
me
after.
right. This makes me think somebody else needs to be muted.
Now you can turn on your microphone. Ikwa.
So this makes me wonder, why does Hahnemann say that you can make an alcohol dilution with the 30C to apply it within the first 24 hours of an injury? And then he mentions previously about bad injuries like bullets and from things like surgery. So it's possible that this helps keep the wound clean. This is what I'm thinking, because this is totally abnormal for Hahnemann to say that it's possible or permissible to use any kind of topical application. And that's what it makes me wonder, is if that falls underneath that kind, as a safety feature. Because surely back in the olden days, it would be hard to keep the wounds clean. So that's what I wonder, if it comes from that. But then there's so many other different people have said, never put arnica on an open wound.
But you know what's the thing? I wanted to correct you. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm 99% sure. Actually, 100-fold potentized dilution of arnica would be. So I think that could also explain the reasoning of why you could apply it to a wound, is because it's very diluted. So it's not that, you have very little substance, so the body can handle it most probably.
Yes, it's not a true tincture at all.
It's not, but
No.
it's not very dynamite either. It's not strong.
Yes. Yeah, so it's a very interesting comment he has here. That's why I think it's so interesting to read the prefaces at the very least to each of the remedies that was proven by Hahnemann, because it's fascinating, because it contradicts so many different things that we hear in various places. And then there's, of course, there are always the people who are very, very happy to do anything topically, because I guess they haven't read it.
Yeah, but yeah, it's great. We can read all that Hahnemann wrote and learn more things from it and get like a broader picture. I think that's the art part of it.
Okay, but the following list of its pure powers points to several other morbid conditions in the human system for which arnica offers sure homeopathic relief. Okay, so don't limit yourself to using arnica only for injuries. He says there's a lot more. It is a medicine of much utility, and although its action, even in large doses, does not last beyond 6 days, yet I have found it indispensable, auxiliary, and intermediate remedy, even in the most chronic cases. Okay, so he's saying here that, Hahnemann regularly tells us that when we're treating a chronic, that there are going to be times and situations when we're going to want to use an intermediate or intercurrent remedy. And what Hahnemann means by an intercurrent is not the use of no-sodes, but the use of other therapeutic agents in potency that are not necessarily of the chronic diseases category. There's the two different, there's the antisporics and then the antivenereals, and then there's the general class of medicines. So he's saying here that he will regularly see that it's a very good, indispensable auxiliary and intermediate remedy, even in most chronic diseases. But its action does not last beyond 6 days.
What's the difference between axillary and intermediate?
Well, auxiliary would be in addition to, and intermediate would be coming between.
Yes, makes sense.
You
Coming
can call
between
it
what?
Between the doses of and
Antisarc?
yes, that. Yes,
Okay.
that.
Okay, those, sure.
And then when he says indispensable auxiliary, when we read, okay, but Hahnemann left us so few cases for our study, and he never wanted us to get caught up in specifics or his thinking. So he says that, I've provided the information for you to follow. Now you have to just kind of figure it out yourself. But we have a lot of case records from Bonninghausen who followed Hahnemann's directions very, very carefully. And what Bonninghausen did is he used the footnote from the fifth organon of the Hahnemann says, in order to overcome being able to redose in the fifth organon, what you need to do is you need to alternate remedies. And Bonninghausen has that alternation in his remedy patterns. And sometimes it really, really kind of like blows people away to see that, let's say Bonninghausen will give, let's say, arsenicum in 200 usually. And then a little later on, a few days later, he'll alternate with something else, perhaps, like a carbovegetalis, and then go back to arsenicum. And that's a very interesting thing because that kind of dosing looks really scary to your modern homeopath. But it's actually one of the directions that Hahnemann gave in the 5th edition of the Organon. And since he had not published the LM potencies in the 6th edition yet, this is basically what people were up to at that point. And that explains the peculiar dosing as a way around having an aggravation from continuous dosing. And then again, we have other directions given in the chronic diseases itself. So anyway, dosing itself is very interesting. Okay, so shall we continue?
Yes.
Okay, yes. We must never employ it in purely inflammatory acute diseases with general heat, chiefly external, nor in diarrheas. Okay, so we are warned never to give arnica in purely inflammatory acute disease with generalized heat, external, nor in diarrhea. In such cases, it will always be found to be very hurtful, the reason of which is obvious from its peculiar mode of action. In some kinds of false pleurisy, however, it is very
Yes, she says, 1 minute.
Yes, go ahead, Sanjay, please.
What is meant by peculiar action, ma'am?
What?
Here, what
As
is
he
the
says
peculiar
here,
arnica?
yeah,
Sir, are you able to hear me?
okay. As he means here, do not prescribe in purely inflammatory diseases. Means internal inflammatory disease. Right?
Yeah.
Purely inflammatory acute diseases. What does he means with the word?
Like systemic inflammations, like febrile conditions, perhaps.
Yeah,
Or a case of maybe infection,
yeah, maybe.
maybe.
Which came from inside, or we have seen Arnica prescribed in cause from injury. Tikwa, any words from your side?
I have lots of words from my side. What do you mean? I'm here reading and talking at the same time.
Paragraph where he
Um,
says we must never employ it in purely inflammatory acute diseases
with
with
generalized
general
heat.
heat and chiefly external, nor in diarrheas.
Mhm.
I
Yep,
think
Joe.
Hahnemann,
Why this
Yeah.
warning?
So fevers, if we're talking about general heat, chiefly external,
no,
right? No?
no, Hahnemann want to give impression from its arnica is very useful in external inflammation and from external injury like that. It's not for internal inflammation. That's what I understand. Like pelvic inflammatory disease, like the whenever we get the signs of inflammations like in pain, redness, heat, if we get
Yeah,
it from internal, from disease from within out, we should not use this arnica, but instead we can use in inflammatory conditions from outside. That means
No.
yeah, but
external.
he
But
mentioned
you're not correct.
only inflammatory acute diseases.
Chiefly external.
Purely inflammatory acute diseases. That means if in chronic, you can use
No,
if the
he
symptoms.
used the word with the general heat, chiefly external.
Chiefly
Ah,
external. But how is
We can use it.
chiefly external?
We can use it
How is chiefly?
if come from
Sorry.
external. We should not use if acute inflammatory disease comes from within due to excessive heat like that. This is what I understand.
But
Tikwa ma'am, can you
it'd
explain?
be within if he uses the word external.
Well, we might find out after we read the proving data
Okay.
and then come back to it.
general heat chiefly external is talking about. Means
Keep,
suppose
there is a comma, sir.
cause,
There is a comma. It's not acute disease, comma, with general heat, comma, chiefly external.
yeah,
It's not a continuous sentence.
Okay. I think Tikva is right. We should read the proving data and see.
Yep, because he says the reason of which is obvious from its peculiar mode of action. So that means that we're going to find out why in the proving data. That's exactly
Yeah.
what it means. Everybody always
Yeah.
likes to jump ahead, but
we'll look at that peculiar mode of action.
yes, exactly that.
Exactly.
In
Okay.
some kinds of false pleurisy, however, it is very efficacious. In such, namely, whose symptoms correspond to those of this root. Okay, so what's pleurisy? Pleurisy is the inflammation of the chest between the chest and the lungs, the pleural membranes. It often comes on during things like flus. There's terrible pleurisy that happen with things like cancer. And then there's simple pleurisy that happen with things like flus. So he says this can be very helpful. So that would be a flu is kind of like an inflammatory acute disease, but not exactly. Anyway, we'll find out more by reading more, because the answer to the question surely lies in the proving. Okay, the best preparation of this medicine for internal use is the decilium development of power. We go to Ivona's video for that,
Yeah, around 30 C.
right? When we can obtain the plant in a green state, we mix the freshly expressed juice obtained from the whole plant when near its flowering time with equal
Mhm.
parts of spirits of wine. 2 drops of the clear fluid obtained by allowing the mixture to stand are first diluted with 98 drops of spirits of wine and potentized by 2 succussions. The dilution is carried on through 29 other vials. Always 1 drop of the weaker dilution added to 100 drops of spirit in the next vial and shaken twice. In the last vial, it is brought up to the decilium development of power. So he's saying basically make a 30 C with spirits and the juice of the plant, but only with 2 succussions between
Why he
bottles.
mentioned 100 drops instead of 99?
That's a good question.
For some reason, before he starts the diluting process with liquids, the first time you do it is just with 2 shakes. I don't know why. Just to mix it first, and then later on, as he dilutes it, he succusses it more to release the charge of the particles. I don't know. But the first time is just to mix it a little bit when he begins, from my understanding.
If we cannot get the green plant, we must be satisfied with a tincture made by adding 10 grains. Remember the grain? A grain is modeled after, the quantity of a grain in pharmacy is modeled after the quantity of a grain of, let's say, wheat. 10 grains of the finely powdered root, as fresh as can be had, to 1,000 drops of alcohol, and allowing it to digest for a week, giving it 1 shake per diem. Okay, so he's saying if you can't get the fresh plant, take the powdered root, add 1,000 drops of alcohol, and let it sit for a week, shaking it once a day. 10 grains of powder. Of this, 1 drop is mixed with 100 drops of alcohol and potentized with 2 succussions, and so on until the decilionth potency is reached. 2 or 3 of the smallest globules. What number is that in India, Sanjay? What number of globules?
A decillion potency.
No, what number globules is this called in India? The small poppy
Smallest
seed
gold.
one. What are the poppy seeds ones called in India?
Poppy seeds.
Yeah, what are they called? What's the number? Number what globules?
Oh,
Poppy seed, I think it's below 10. 10 because 10 is also very large than poppy seed. Poppy seed globules don't have any number.
Poppy seed globules
It
don't have a
doesn't-
number?
Yeah, it's below 10. Let me check.
You got your poppy seed size globules there handy?
Yeah, I have, and I need to find now.
Does anybody know what number that's called when you order it from the pharmaceutical company in India?
oh, I don't.
Zero. I think.
I know Helios
10
has
is-
number 6
yes.
and number 3s, but those are not poppy seed size. kind of curious now.
Actually, we don't buy those small poppy seed glue from pharmacy.
I bought them. I bought them in India. I think I bought them with you. Didn't I buy them
Yeah,
with you?
yeah.
I did.
We bought for you. That
Those
one.
must be so useful. I was trying
I
to
think
dissolve the belladonna
it's
yesterday,
10.
and it was like a big one, and it took like 5 minutes, you know, to dissolve. I was like, oh, come on.
I know. So Hahnemann gives us a trick.
An emergency. If it was
Hahnemann
poppy
says
seed,
I
it
remember.
crush it. Hahnemann says to crush it first. And then that way it won't take so long to
Oh!
dilute.
Oh, I didn't know if I was allowed to.
Yes, you are.
That's a
You
good
are
idea.
allowed to.
Okay.
Not only you're allowed to crush the pellet, but what you can do is you can put it with lactose. He also suggests taking the pellet and putting it with some more lactose and then crushing the whole thing together and then putting that in your water dilution.
Oh, fabulous. Fabulous. I love it.
So there's definitely no problem because I know what you're talking about. All my stock that I have back from, 30 years ago, it takes forever to dissolve.
Forever.
Ever. You could be
And when it's an
waiting for-
emergency, it's like a big deal. I was like,
right.
he's gonna die. You know? So yeah, good to know. I mean,
Yes, you can
all
crush
ended
it.
well, but okay, sweet.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that between like 2 spoons, or you could do it just however way you figure it out. A cup,
No.
put like one on a paper and then like crush it with a cup, dump the
No,
paper.
for sure. But because I didn't know that, and also like we don't know still like physically what we're dealing with, so I wasn't sure if I like break the power if I crush it or something. I don't
No,
know.
you're okay. It is a recommended
Okay.
practice by Hahnemann.
Okay, amazing.
Okay, so we use 2 or 3
Okay.
of the smallest globules moistened with the highest potency are the most ordinary dose for internal use. Okay, now we go to the modifiers of the action. Camphor is the
Mhm.
antidote for large doses in unhomeopathic cases,
Mhm.
but wine aggravates its injurious effects. So if we've given people arnica wrong, yes, Sivakumar?
But in previous paragraph, Hahnemann mentioned Arnica working well with wine in external application or internal like that. In previous paragraph, we studied, na? But here
Yeah.
he mentioned that wine aggravates its injurious effects like that. Please refer.
It must be because when it's given internally that if people have had too much arnica, that wine's going to make them feel worse. Somehow it's going to increase it. I don't really know. If we had Hahnemann in our pocket or we had a time machine, it would be so helpful.
One day we'll know.
Yes, one day we will all
In
know.
that line, what he mentioned, camphor is antidote for large doses of unhomeopathic cases. Specifically mentioned unhomeopathic, but a wine aggravates its injurious effects. He's talking about unhomeopathic cases.
Yes, arnica poisoning, right?
If you use arnica like that in
Homeopathy.
large doses, that time camphor will antidote, and if you use this wine, that will aggravate its injurious effect,
Wow.
right?
So
But
Yeah.
maybe sorry.
A simple thing, he's talking about arnica use in large doses.
Like a tincture,
In
Sanjay?
unhomeopathic.
Could that be
Huh?
a tincture? Would that be a tincture? A mother tincture?
But what if it's a homeopathic tincture? Is it okay
Right.
then?
Well, unless there's been too large a dose. If there's been
Unhomeopathic
too large
cases.
a
The
dose.
word here is the key. large doses in unhomeopathic cases.
Ah,
Camphor will be for work as antidote, and wine will aggravate Arnica's injurious effects.
we have a question in the chat.
Oh, I don't see the chat. Okay. Where's my chat? I don't see my chat feature. Okay, somebody read out the question.
So Salvastri
Christina?
Lathirvel is asking, so we need to give arnica only in high potency for internal use, question mark.
Yes
You
and
can
no.
use in low
Yeah.
potencies, but not less than that 3 potency. You can go
But-
above 3, 12 or 30 or 200. It depends.
I'm confused now. What did Hahnemann say? When do we use the decillions?
During the first
Decillion.
24 hours.
Ah,
During the
by
first 24 hours, you can mix it with wine and put it with 5
That
to
is
10
low.
drops of the 100th.
that's one
I
thing.
think Hahnemann's time 30th potency is the highest potency.
Sorry?
30th
Hahnemann's
potency is highest among low potencies.
In Hahnemann's time.
Yeah,
Because
but
he
then,
didn't prepare more than 30, nah?
Yeah,
No.
Hahnemann used more than 30 also.
Yes.
yeah, he used the
But this is not the
200 and the
topic.
1M, and then he moved on to the LMs.
I didn't
So
hear
what's the year
using
of,
one name, but okay.
The
What's the
Bonihausen
year?
mentions that he did. He experimented with it a little bit.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Sir,
Hardcore.
I heard N.M. Chaudhary was suffering with the internal hemorrhages of brain. Some doctor, Indian doctor, I think, he treated with Arnica 3x potency.
Okay.
N.M. Chaudhary suffered with internal brain hemorrhages problem. Treated with Arnica.
Yeah, you can use Arnica as low as 3 potency. Yeah, not sorry, 3 potency.
I have an interesting story about using arnica in a traumatic event. This is the first and only time I ever used a 10M. And it would have been on a young girl who had been a victim of a terrorist attack. And I was contacted by somebody that she knew, and well, because she wasn't talking to anybody, they had to scrape her off the pavement, basically. And she was in hospital, and they were waiting for her mother to arrive from overseas. And I said, why don't you go on over to the pharmacy and let's get a 10M and see if you can try to save her life. And so she went to the hospital. This girl, her brain had been really, really injured, along with the rest of her. And she applied the 10M in dilution to the girl's skin by rubbing it, even though she was taking the arnica herself. But she would figured out it's worth it. If there's going to be any proving, it's going to be worth it. And the next day, the girl, her mother, when she finally flew in from the Western Hemisphere, asked her daughter if she could move her foot. And she moved her foot. I mean, it was absolutely extraordinary. Nobody understood how she could possibly move her foot because the result of her injuries were so severe.
That's amazing.
I know.
Did she
I thought so
recover?
too. They didn't let her recover.
Why?
Everybody recommended that she be taken off life support.
Oh no, that's so
So we
sad.
didn't. I know, it was very, very, very sad. But it was a very interesting thing that she actually
It is
did move
very
her foot.
interesting, yeah.
When her mother said so. And I wonder what would have happened if she would
Yeah,
have been
that's
allowed
so
to recover.
sad. So sad.
Yeah,
But
but it's
okay.
interesting. But that is the one and only time I've ever used the 10M.
Yeah, I would never think of using, I mean, arnica in such a high, like the general class of remedies, I don't think in general we think of using them, the general class in high potencies.
Yeah,
The
But it's just-
antidepressant, which we consider like constitutionals, you know, we can imagine it more because it's done more often, but I think that's it's more of a dogma than a fact. Sorry, I interrupted you.
okay, so here we come to the proving data. And we have a lot of different provers here. We've got August, Baer, Franz, Gross, Frederick Hahnemann, Hornsberg, Kumar, Langer, Staff, and that other guy whose name is impossible to say.
I forgot to ask my mom.
Wieslingus. Okay, and then there's a few
Yes.
old school authorities are quoted. So this is things from
Oh,
various
script.
journals and medical books. And in the
What's the year of-
Fragmenta, Arnica has 150 symptoms. In the first edition of Materia Medica Pura, 230 symptoms. And in the second edition, 592 symptoms. And in this third edition of Materia Medica Pura by Hahnemann, we have 638 symptoms. So when we come to the proving data starts with the old time before where it starts with the Censorium first. In the schema, we have Censorium first in this remedy.
Mhm.
What's the actual year of proving of Arnica, ma'am?
What's the what of proving date of Arnica?
It's
I
in
missed-
1805.
I can't hear quite right. What is he saying? JJ, what does he say?
Mark, can you repeat?
What's the actual year of proving of Arnica? It is 1805 or?
Here, he is talking about in which year Arnica been proven.
Oh, he started proving it in Fragmenta. And then added more symptoms for the first edition of Materia Medica Pura and added more for the second. So they've done 1, 2, 3, 4 provings. And each time there's more information added with the additional provings. So this is the third edition.
Oh,
So
we
he
see
proves
here.
for the ma'am, huh?
You see right here on the paper. This is from the third edition with 638 symptoms, but he started it with Fragmenta. And then he added more people, asked more people to do more provings. I mean, they just must have gone around and just done provings, just willy-nilly. Hey, what are you doing this week? Oh, I'm doing another proving.
Living the good life.
Living the good life. Some of these
life, yeah.
provings are so harsh. You know what I mean?
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. Remember Illumina? It was terrible. People had so many terrible pains with Illumina. Okay, so
That
we
should
started.
be. As it
Right,
should be.
as it should be. It shouldn't just be dreams and mental fluff, right?
No, because we need to cure the symptoms that appear in the proving. So the worse they are, the better cures we'll have, right?
Very good. Yes,
Yeah,
indeed.
not just the dreams.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Okay, so Arnica starts with Censorium in the schema. During
Mhm.
dinner, sudden vertigo as he would fall forwards. Okay,
Mhm.
dizziness, fall forwards.
Okay.
Vertigo, dizzy while walking.
Giddy.
Yes, which giddy
That's the
means
same?
kind of dizzy, kind of feeling off, kind of feeling weird, you know? It's
Mhm.
kind of like vertigo, but it's not quite vertigo. It's kind of like a weird internal feeling.
Mhm.
It doesn't
Okay.
mean like jokey, the way people use giddy now.
Ah, yeah.
Vertigo in the forehead, especially when walking, when it seems to her as if all went round with her in a circle and would tumble with her. So we have vertigo centered in the forehead, worse when walking, and then it feels like everything goes around in a circle and she would fall down. Vertigo when she sits and leans the head forward, almost unnoticed. But when she raises or moves the head, immediately a feeling as if all went around with her. Okay, so she's sitting, she leans her head forward, and then when she raises her head, raises up or moves the head, immediately a feeling as if everything's going around.
Oh, but that's almost, you know what that reminds me of? You know, like when you when you have low blood pressure and then you suddenly stand up and then you get dizzy. It's similar, right? Interesting.
That might cure that.
Maybe,
It's
okay,
worth
cool.
experimenting. Okay, and then we have symptom 5. See how it has the 5 here before the symptom? This is how we count our symptoms out. So then we have 5, vertigo, 6, confusion of head, 7, confusion of head, vertigo, and anxiety, increased by artificial vomiting. What's artificial vomiting, Sanjay?
It's when you force yourself to vomit. Sorry.
Yes, it's when you force yourself to vomit. It's when you stick your
Sorry.
finger down your throat and you make yourself vomit. Okay.
Understood, ma'am.
So, yes.
Artificial vomiting, which means it's a induced vomiting. No.
Yes.
Like when you're drunk and you force yourself to vomit so you feel better. Just me? Okay.
It's not just you. It's just that we have a large Hindu audience here that has never had the benefit of that.
Oh yeah, you're not missing out, guys. Don't worry. Okay. Moving on.
Moving on. Okay, we had 5, 6, 7, and then 8 is stupefying headache in the morning. 9, heaviness in the forehead. 10, he sits buried in thought, but does not actually think of anything. That's interesting. He seems to be
Interesting.
that he's thinking about stuff, but he's not really thinking about anything. Interesting.
Yeah, I feel that's quite common actually nowadays.
Just spaced out, maybe.
Yeah. With people being burned out and everything. Very interesting. I feel like these symptoms are quite common with people, or maybe it's just me.
No, it is. That's why Hahnemann's saying that it is an indispensable auxiliary and
Indispensable
intermediate.
auxiliary. Yeah.
Because these
Yeah,
have
because
so many symptoms that people have on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love
and
it so
then
far.
Number 11, want of memory. He forgets the word on his lips. How often does that
Also
happen?
common.
Yeah, it happens to me all the
It's on the
time.
tip of my tongue.
It happens all the time. Okay. Distraction of the mind. He cannot fix his thoughts long on one subject. So we have like a lot of different things and he can't focus.
Mhm.
Okay, so that was 10, 11, 12, 13. Along with cloudiness of the head and confusion of the lateral parts of the skull, contracted pupils.
Huh.
Dullness of the head without any particular headache. 15, he readily falls into a waking dream. There we go again, the daydreaming. Because we had up here something that seems like just spaced out kind of daydreaming, right? So we have daydreaming in this family. And then there's
Yeah, but
internal
waking dream would be like really getting in your head, right? When you
Mhm.
start imagining and everything, like you're really not present,
right.
which is a bit
Making-
different than buried in thought, I think, and not being
Right.
able to think like really clearly, you know. But yeah, it's similar. I agree. Sorry.
Sanjay, you want to read for a few minutes?
16, yeah.
16.
16, yeah.
Actually, when I have to read, I need to turn my head for my right side.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Internal heat, especially in the head, with heaviness of it without thirst.
Mhm.
17. Burning in head with aching, outstretching pain. And then this is 17, 18. And bold symptom of arnica. Burning in brain, the rest of body being cool, at least not hot.
Hmm.
What does this mean?
Like internal heat of the skull. Like burning sensation in the brain, basically.
Ekwa?
Yeah, burning sensation in the head. The rest of the body is not
Burning
hot.
rest of body being cool means
Right, the
head
rest of the
is
body's
hot,
cool.
head is or internal head is hot, and body is not hot. He's saying it's not. He is not talking about uh, heat the body, rest of body as compared to head. Head
Yep.
is more hotter than the body.
Hot head, cold body.
Yeah.
Or cool body.
Sir,
Yes, like
Heat in the
similarly
head.
like
forehead of the person is
But is this internal or external? Is it a sensation or
Talking
it's
about
like
burning in
Sensation,
brain means
burning internal.
it's internal.
okay,
Yeah, it would be under sensation, burning internal in a repertory.
sensation, okay. So it's not but like head hot or
Well, if it depends on what kind of repertory you're using. If you're using a Bodenhausen repertory, you're going to use burning heat internal, and then you're
Mhm.
going to use like the location,
Mhm.
and then add more modalities to it.
Okay. Fine.
Okay. 15, symptom number, what is
19.
it? 19. Heat
Yeah.
in the head, rest of the body being cold, at least not hot. Heat in the head, same symptom.
Sorry, what symptom?
18 and 19,
No, never mind. Sorry.
Ikwa?
Yeah,
18 and 19 are
we're
the
pretty much
same.
basically, yeah, except one specifies the brain and the other one is heat in the head. But we don't really know if the brain is actually hot. So it's kind of the same thing. Then we have an inclusion that is outside proving data from historical documents. With number 2, number
Mhm.
20 gives us headache. How useful to the homeopath. Headache.
20,
Yeah.
headache.
Very characteristic.
It's difficult to read that within the bracket.
That's okay. It just shows us that the bracket that it is from de Meza, from
Some kind of a journal,
Edinburgh.
right?
Yeah, it's from the Edinburgh Journal. Okay.
As a reference, yeah.
Mhm.
he mentioned
In the
something in his
temples,
notebook.
an aching pain
Oh, Edinburgh.
after
What?
in the temples, an aching pain after half hour.
Mhm.
After aching headache, there occurs also in the temple probing aching headache.
Mhm. Okay.
Then aching pain in forehead,
Mhm.
which increases when near the warm stove. Means with going near stove or that cooking gas that might
It's more like the
be-
fireplace that I have, Sanjay. You know how the
can be like
fireplace I have? Yeah, that's what they usually refer to with the warmth of the stove. They're talking about an old fashioned fireplace that people have to keep their homes.
okay.
So heat aggravates, basically.
Mhm.
Yeah, aching in the forehead, which increases near warm stove, as if brain were rolled into a lump.
Wow.
Terrible.
Sensation. Brain is rolled into a
Into a
lump.
lump. Terrible.
25. Aching and outstretching pain as from something soft in the crown, withdrawing
Lump.
in the occiput and tearing towards the
Lump.
temple.
Outstretching. In the crown.
Outstretching.
What is mean lump? Sir,
Yeah.
what's mean by lump? L-U-M-P.
A lump. A
Lump.
lump is like
Node.
a ball.
Node.
Say it in Hindi.
Small,
No, he
small.
has no Hindi.
But
Brain
isn't
where
also a
as-
lump, like if you get, sorry, a lump like when you get hit very hard, like in cartoons, and then like you grow like a lump, you know what I mean?
A lump
Okay.
just means like a mass, something that's
Mass.
congealed.
Okay. Lump. Okay.
Any lump we see like ganglion, nodule. Huh?
Yeah, I thought that he mentioned some parts in olden language like that.
Yeah.
Carry on, sir.
Aching and outstretching pain as from something soft in the crown, which with drawing the occiput and tearing towards temples. Now this is bold. Aching pain over eyes going towards temple. Over eyes going towards temple with sensation as if integuments of forehead were spasmodically contracted after 1 hour.
Yeah, that's an
What's-
interesting one because the intuments means like the skin. And there's aching pain over the eyes going towards the temples
Temples.
and a sensation as if the skin of the forehead were spasmodically contracted.
It's like contracted like this.
Right. And then we're going to see a number of different symptoms that has that contracted feeling of the skin. And so I looked up in the repertory, my regular repertory, that the rubric that we would use for a number of these different things would be generalities, tightness, external.
But are you sure integument is just the skin? Or
It's the
is it more
skin or
like
the membranes. It's the whole thing that holds the body together.
like the outer layer, like the surface of the forehead, basically.
Right.
The
Yes.
outer layer. Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I have
It-
that often. I feel like I have that often. Like it's a common type of headache,
Mhm.
right?
It's stretching, pulling like this sensation, like contraction.
Yeah. But I
Like
feel like
this-
if people
First
don't have a proper migraine kind of pain, like if you have a headache, it'll be, I don't know, I have it anyway. That type.
Can be considered like that. Migraine can be of Arnica.
No, I'm not saying it's a migraine. I'm saying like unless people have a proper migraine headaches, I think that's like now described in this symptom is maybe a second most common type of headache.
Yeah.
Or it's quite common. I might be wrong, but anyway. Migraines would be more like within, I picture it, but again, might be wrong.
Yeah, migraines are usually more one-sided. With
Oh, I didn't
visual
know that.
disturbances.
Migraine can be one-sided, can be alternating. Migraine is very general word.
Yeah, it's a very
Oh,
general
okay.
word.
Oh, okay.
First
It is.
taking pain in forehead, then shooting and jerking, shooting pain in forehead with chilliness. Aching, pressing pain in forehead, especially severe when walking, going upstairs, thinking and reading. This can be considered in migraine. But
What?
in
Really?
migraine, generally there is a probing type of pain or pulsating type of pain.
Yeah.
We might see in Arnica also that pain, but we'll see what comes next. They are still on aching pain.
It's also Arnica's main affinity on forehead, sir. Na?
Arnica.
So far, but
But
also some
moves
temples.
means extension.
We've had temples
We
mentioned
need to
and multiple
understand that
parts.
aching and aching pain, tearing pain, pulsating, throbbing, differences. And region, aching in the right temple bone, followed by sneezing. Have you noticed when you sneeze, often many people, I have that symptom. It, uh,
Which one?
while aching in this frontal bone or temples,
Mm-hmm. Me too, yeah.
followed by, but here is aching pain in the right temple bone, followed by sitting. Pain comes first and then comes sneezing.
Not
Whereupon
temple,
its
frontal.
extent first, this is very
Sorry.
important. Whereupon it extends first into left and then into right ear. He has pain for forehead. It begins, then he sneeze, and then there is pain in this ear, left first and then right.
Oh, okay, interesting. Sorry.
Can remember very important symptoms in Arnica. Actually, we haven't read such proving means long Materia Medica symptom of Arnica in other Materia Medicas. Aching, painful drawing in left half of the skull from ear upwards. Left half of skull after 3 hours. Aching, stupefying pain in forehead, rather externally. Can you explain this symptom, Tikwa or
Yeah,
Yuana?
aching with stupefying. They feel it's like a state of
Pain in forehead,
confusion,
rather externally.
and it's more of an
Earlier,
external pain.
uh,
And it's with the stupefaction. Stupefaction is when people feel kind of like spaced out, not really with it, kind of like it's kind of like confused, but not quite confused. It's just a sensation of being stupefied. Maybe we should look up the word stupefied because it's fun. It's kind of didn't realize that we that's a good idea. Stupefied. I know when people are stupefied, it's like stunned. Kind of
Mm,
like stunned. It's kind of like confused.
mm,
aching pain externally on the crown,
on the crown. It's like
this part, crown. After sneezing twice, the pain in the left side of the forehead, as after violent blow.
hmm,
And we know that Arnica is first remedy for blows, shocks, contusion, or injury.
Yeah.
He says, after sneezing twice, pain in the left side of forehead as after violent blow. What does
Uh-huh.
it mean? As after? He's comparing how the pain after blow is violent. Similar pain you will notice after sneezing,
Yeah.
right?
And
Apparently.
even the fact that the prover says that it feels as though he'd had a violent blow to the head, right? That's how we
As
know partially its
after violent
utility.
blow.
Its utility
Yeah,
in
that's so
bruises,
interesting.
contusions, etc.
But it's also the
And,
second time a sneezing activates a set of symptoms. I find that quite interesting.
It is interesting.
Even peculiar, I might add.
Sneezing aggravates.
Yeah.
Head
Head
pain,
symptoms.
sneezing aggravate. Head pain,
Yeah.
sneezing aggravate.
Yeah. For example.
Yeah.
And we can also add
Forehead.
type of pain location.
Forehead.
Yeah. Left side, yeah. But we also had one, I don't know, 20 or something. There was also sneezing. Frontal, and then he sneezed and it moved, right?
Mhm.
That's why I mentioned it. Okay. Excuse me.
Are you looking for the rubric?
Sorry?
Are you looking for rubric?
No.
When coughing, violent shooting in Sensiput. What is Sensiput?
Cincinnati.
Huh?
I don't know.
Ika?
Which part of the head is it?
I don't know. Sensiput.
Mr. Anatomy
Old word.
Professor G.
Probably that's old word.
Maybe it's next to the occiput.
Probably.
We can
Sinus,
see.
the sinus of occiput.
You can Google it. Sensiput. Kumaran,
I'll
do you
Google
know
it.
what is
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Doing,
does anybody know?
Sir,
You'll get snack.
sir,
Okay.
sinciput is the part between the forehead and vertex, sir. Occiput is the backside.
forehead and vertex? This
Forehead
part.
and vertex, between vertex.
Ah.
Occiput is the
Since
back
it
part.
is- So sinciput is it's
Sinciput is
diagonal.
back
So there's an
side and
occiput
this is-
here, and then there's a sinciput here. Here.
Okay, this part.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
sir.
front
Yeah.
part of the skull.
Very
That
nice.
part of
The
the-
unicorn where the horn would be, the sinciput. I think so. Around that part.
Sir, forehead to crown, sir.
We can say narwhal, narwhal.
The
Yeah.
crown is round. Crown is round. This whole
Yeah.
part of
The
vertex.
crown is the area, yeah. But vertex is on the crown, right? From what I see.
Vertex. Great
Huh?
shoots in the head on cuffing. We
Oh, I
have
missed it. I didn't get close enough to
Copy.
my computer to see it. You had the display and I think,
Can you see it?
yeah.
Can you see it,
okay.
Tikva?
Yeah, no, I can't read it. I
I'm
can't
sorry.
read it.
Well,
Sinciput is below the X, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway.
36. You have a head on cuffing, headache on coughing, and headache on sneezing.
Yeah, that's so strange.
Headache on coughing is pretty common. You know, you get people who have a flu or something and they cough and they get the
Yeah,
bursting in the
yeah.
head, the bursting in the head, the bursting in the head, right?
But why? But why? There has to be a reason.
Congestion, things like congestion.
Postural, probably.
What? Okay.
Okay.
What's next?
Headache shooting upwards, which recur when coughing and even when move the head, which are only alive when he lie on painful side of the head.
That's better. Allayed means made better. So it's
Okay.
better when laying on the painful side. That's an important modality. If we attended Boninghausen last week, we know all about modalities like side and which way we lay down and things like that. Next week we have, or this week, we have the modality of time in our Boninghausen learning.
Quando.
That's right.
I read my
Fine
PDF file.
Good, good.
Allah means aggravation, ma'am.
Better. Amelioration.
Yeah, it's ameliorated by laying on the painful side of the head. And then fine shooting pain in the forehead, which is aggravated by raising the eyes with heat of face and thirst. Okay, so how do we raise our eyes? What does that mean?
Like to look
Raising
upward.
of eyes. Aggravated by raising of eyes with heat of face and thirst.
Yep, it's worse by looking up. We're worse because we're looking up.
Yeah. So sad.
Shooting in the forehead, on forehead, jerking and shooting. So there's jerking pains, there's shooting pains, and there's problems with sneezing, and there's headache as if a nail were driven in the temple with general perspiration about midnight, followed by exhaustion.
Jesus
Okay.
Christ. Very specific.
And then we'll have from time to time recurring fine shooting, tearing headache at the left temple. Stitches rapidly following one another in the temporal region towards the forehead. Remember stitches? Stitches, just like you're sewing.
Fine stitches.
Yes, fine stitches, not the obtuse pain. The obtuse pain would be a large pain that would be like from like a larger object. The fine stitches would be a very small, thin pain. And the obtuse pain would be a large stitching pain. Okay.
Oh. Ah, okay.
So stitches rapidly following one another in the temporal region towards the forehead. In the left frontal protuberance, a rapid shooting with sensation as if blood were extravasated in the forehead. Okay, there we have like a bruise again. A bruise
What?
sensation.
What is protuberance? What is
this part.
extravasated?
This part,
You know, this part
Elevated
here
part
above
of
the
forehead.
eyebrows.
elevated part
Oh.
of forehead.
Okay, I know that. No. Thank you.
People have it to
And
varying degrees. Yeah, you got the
Yeah,
Neanderthal
I have-
version. Yeah, mine isn't too big. Sanjay's is bigger.
I just noticed I had it the other day. I didn't notice it before, but I do.
Your protuberance is bigger than mine, Sanjay.
I
Yeah,
Yes.
his is noticeable.
Mhm.
It's a guy thing, I guess. Yeah.
I'm not sure it's a guy thing. I don't know if like my sons really have much of a protuberance. I don't think they do. Should I bring in two guys? I got two guys over there in the other room. I think they play a computer game. I can't believe
Yeah.
you don't hear them. Okay,
Because you have
we can-
headphones.
we can have just 50 symptoms in this session.
okay. So we'll just finish this up here and then we'll continue next week because this is going to take forever, especially when we start getting into like the meat of the things and we start talking about which way it goes like this and which way it goes like that. But you know, this is
We're
really
really
useful
gonna take it too
information.
far.
Yeah, we need to have that discussion of understanding these symptoms.
It's so helpful.
No, it's fantastic, but I can't believe we're doing it in 2 parts. Okay.
But we need to, we cannot have those 634 symptoms in one session.
Well, Sanjay can't.
What about recess?
But
With recess?
look, watch video of 3 hours or 4 hours.
That's why so many people don't watch the video and they just listen. You know, like people like Devera, she just puts on headphones or these things and then she listens to it while she does things.
No,
Instead
but
of
Sanjay
reading
doesn't
along.
want the videos to be
Yeah.
too long. But we can make it
We
in,
can
like we
also
can do
have-
it in one go, but make more parts. You just stop the recording and make a new one. But I mean, if you don't have time today and you want to prolong it for next Sunday, that's okay. But we don't have to. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But maybe we should discuss this while we're recording.
But we do know that Dr. Siva Kumran likes to attend this early time.
Ah,
Pardon?
That you like this timing. It's not late. Anyway, let's continue.
yeah.
Okay, guys.
Well,
Shooting pain in the forehead, obtuse
Yes.
stitches. Here now we're at the obtuse stitches. That would mean larger stitches, wider
yeah,
stitches,
mhm.
not fine stitches, but wider stitches. I remember when I first learned these different things that came in, things like proving data with the obtuse pain versus the fine pain, things like that. I found it to be extremely helpful and very interesting. Okay, obtuse stitches in the temples, jerking, shooting headache on stooping, as if all would come out at the forehead. At the same time, nausea and qualmishness around the heart. Twitching, tearing headache increased by stooping and coughing. Twitching headache in the syncopate. Tearing
What does
in the
qualm
left
mean?
temple,
Sorry.
and when walking in the open air, reoccurrence of the aching, outstretching headache. So it's an outstretching headache. It's pressing outward. And that is done by Franz, that notation. Okay, so we have all these different types of headaches. And then we have repeated tearing headache in the left temple, great internal and external heat of the head, transient burning on the crown and neck externally, formication in the forehead, formication above the orbits. And then we have a questionable symptom when we have the parentheses. Headache only tolerable when laying, but on rising up and sitting up in bed, intolerable. So that one is questionable. Hahnemann put it in parentheses. Okay, so the formication is like a sensation of things moving and itching. Formication in the crown externally. So we have it kind of like moving, itching kind of thing at the top of the head. Sensation of coldness.
Formication is a sensation as if some just crawling like sensation, cobweb like sensation.
It's like
It's from
Insects.
Latin. Formica is an ant. So it's
Yes,
ant.
exactly. And then we know that from Formica.
Some
Formica
insects.
rufa is the remedy made from an ant. So yep,
Ah, didn't know there was a remedy.
yep, Formica rufa,
I know it because of formic acid.
formic acid. Mhm. And then you have Formica instead of laminate, right? Now tell me why that's called Formica. Mhm. Are they making laminate out of ants? I think not. But maybe it's meant to just give us the sensation that it's tough like an ant. I don't know. That is a good question. We look up the etymology of formica. Anyway, we digress.
Yeah, too much. But okay.
Sensation of coldness on a small spot of the forehead, as if you were touched by a cold thumb. A pain as if a knife were thrust through the left side of the head to the other side at the same time. Internal coldness in the head, so that the hair stood on end. Whew. On some parts of the occiput, pain as if the hair were pulled out, or like sharp electric shocks. Shooting itching on the hairy scalp, not removed by scratching.
Shooting itching.
Mhm.
Interesting.
The scalp down to the eyebrows lies closely attached to the skull, as it's almost immovable. There we go again with the generalities, tightness external. On the side of the forehead, pimples, partly filled with pus. The face is very much fallen in. Okay, that is a journal entry again. Heat, dry heat in the face towards evening to behind the ears without thirst, with very cold nose. Cramp-like tearing on the left eyebrow.
Sanjay,
Contracted
could you please scroll?
pupils.
Because I don't have the book.
Where were you, Sanjay?
Where I am.
Were you daydreaming?
In a waking dream.
Right.
This symptom. I think I am lost.
Yeah, you got lost. You were daydreaming.
Symptom?
67.
So 4 more. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we have contracted pupils. So the pupils are small. And we have staring eyes betraying anxiety. So the person has a look of anxiety in their eyes. They're staring and they look nervous. Okay, so that would be an observation. There would be objective phenomena. And you remember that in all cases, when we see people, that objective phenomena of what we observe in the patient, the person who needs our assistance, is very important to take note of in all situations. That's part of what I don't like about seeing people in Zoom, is that you miss some of
Yeah.
these things. Like you're only just seeing like the head, so you're missing a
Mm.
whole body's worth of things. We don't know if somebody's like flicking their foot constantly underneath their table. We don't know. So it leaves out a lot of our objective phenomena to see people over video. And, while in one instance, it's fabulous that we have video, on the other instance, we miss out a lot of seeing people in real life settings.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have staring eyes betraying anxiety. That means there's a look of anxiety in the eyes. The border of the upper eyelid where it touches the eyeball internally is painful when the eyeball is moved, as if we're too dry and somewhat sore. So it's underneath the upper eyelid. Contracted pupils with cloudiness of the head, sharp fine stitches in the inner canthus. Okay, so now we're on a different segment. We're down in the eyes. So I think we could stop here with Arnica. We've covered the Censorium and we have covered the headache symptoms. So there's a lot of headache in Arnica, that perhaps it is an underutilized remedy, as are many. many remedies are underutilized. People tend to have favorites and they only think along certain lines, and so few of the proving data are represented in so many Materia Medicas. If you pull up a basic Materia Medica, that only has keynotes, we might be missing valuable data that we might need for a patient. That's why it's always good when we have our initial analysis to go into the proving data with our leading remedies with good coverage.
We will finish in symptom 100 now. Another 30 symptoms.
You want to read for a few minutes, Sivakumar?
Yes, ma'am. We will finish in
30.
the 100. Another 30 symptom. First 100 symptom we will finish. You continue, ma'am.
100.
Going up to 100.
Region wise.
Okay, okay.
Can I close this recording now?
Well, thank you for joining us for this segment of Arnica.
And next time again in this continuation of take one or two